because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to proceed with this. On Sunday, I bought something from this store. I paid cash for it. I took it home. I found out it didn't work. So today, less than 48 hours later, I took it back to the store and asked if I could get a refund. Sounds reasonable, right? The girl at the store told me no, even though I still had the receipt. I asked if I could get a replacement instead. Again, this person told me no. So I asked to see a manager, and when he came, I told him I'm not really happy, and I explained that I bought the item, had got it home, and it didn't work. The manager just smiled and looked at me, and he told me to my face that I was out of luck. No refund, no free replacement. Talking about mad. But I tell you what, I will never, ever, ever, and will I ever buy another lotto ticket from that store again. That's with me. Greetings, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests. The story I just told might have been a little bit of a story, but how many of you can think of many times in your life when someone was asking for your hard-earned money and you had this thought going on in your head? Does this fool actually think I'm gonna come back here or tell anyone about this place after the way I've been treated? I don't think so, right? Most people live their entire lives without ever figuring out how to get what they want out of life. And because businesses, organizations, and groups are all run and staffed by people, these businesses, organizations, and groups don't have a clue. It took me over 25 years and 3 epiphanies to not only learn the secret of how to get everything I wanted in my life and to cement that knowledge as truth in every fiber of my being. In the early 80s, after my first year of college, I became an engineering student assistant for Caltrans here in Sacramento. I mostly worked on research projects, 4 in total. That was during my time there. But during the summers, I was able to go into the field. That was fun. This one such trip entailed myself and this employee named Dutch. Spending a week traveling between Sacramento and Truckee, we were taking core samples out of the highway with this large drill truck. Later, after we returned, I would then centrifuge the sample and I would separate the asphalt from the aggregate. I would then run various tests on the resulting asphalt. These readings would be included in one of my current research projects. Let's get back to the field trip. I was a 19-year-old black kid from not the best part of town, and Dutch was this gruffy old white guy in his mid to late 60s that communicated by various levels of tone grunts. Needless to say, we did not have a whole lot in common, right? The first day, we got into a big argument and decided that we were not going to speak to each other for the rest of our trip, this entire week, unless it had something to do with work. With nothing to do, I decided to drive to North Shore every night and visit a casino for the first time in my life. Let's just say, after losing money at the blackjack table, busting the left brake light of the Caltrans vehicle that I was driving when I was trying to park after I got back to the motel, and then having to come up with a story to my managing engineer when I got back about how said light got broken. And I was on a mission to get my money back from the casino. After almost 5 years, reading books on blackjack, and learning how to count cards. It all culminated with me writing the statistical analysis program. You see, I wrote a program for one of my research projects that would allow me to analyze the beta coefficients of 19 different variables. Since I had written this program for work, it seemed a shame not to use it for my vendetta against the casinos, right? I dealt myself 500 imaginary hands and kept track of 5 different variables. And after spending a couple of days analyzing the variables, I headed to Lake Tahoe with vengeance on my mind. Well, after going bust in about 15 minutes, I quickly realized that even though there were no flaws in the program, there were flaws in my execution. And after 5 years of battle, I waved the white flag and vowed never to leave money in any casino again without getting something in return. Since 1985, I can say that I have done just that. That was my first epiphany. My fortune or success was not going to come from a casino, game of chance, or just plain without me causing it to happen. In 1993, I got involved in a direct selling company and built a network of people like me that totaled somewhere between 30 and 40,000 people. It was then that I had the second epiphany. All roads to success lead through other people. By this time, I thought I had it all figured out. Years of experiences and lessons had me thinking I had it all dialed in. Then I filed bankruptcy in the late 90s from a failed telecommunications consulting company that I started just a couple of years later. Really. Even though I was successful building such a large network of salespeople, several years later, I realized that I really did not understand how I did it. I had no clue. Over the next 5 years, I rebuilt my financial picture, started 4 businesses, and with any definition of success that I could think of, I was successful. And then it happened. Even today, 13 years later, I can still see myself sitting in the back of that room in 2007 with pain in my stomach, so real it felt like I had been gut punched. Tears were coming down my eyes and so fast and in such volume, it soaked the paper that I was trying to write on with an ink pen, ink smudged all over. Never before had I felt so unempowered and lost because I learned that the foundation that allowed me to train and mentor thousands of salespeople in the 90s and build 4 businesses in the 2000s was flawed and insufficient completely. My world was rocked, people. 20 years prior to that event in 1987, I was on the island of Oahu in a restaurant on the top of the Ala Moana Hotel with a gorgeous view of Honolulu, and I mean gorgeous. That was 30 years ago, and even though I cannot tell you exactly what I ate, it was probably mahi-mahi, knowing me. I can tell you that meal set me back almost $200 with wine. All the usual things were memorable about that experience that usually comes with eating at a 5-star restaurant. Sniffing the court, meal presentation, ambiance. What I will remember most, however, was a busboy and his pitcher of water, hunkered down in the corner, watching the water, the level of my glass, just watching it. We had 3 to 5 people assigned to our table, and it appeared to me that busboy's only job was to look at my glass and make sure it never got below half empty. I felt so good after that meal that I tipped the waiter and his crew $100 on top of the $200 I'd spent on food and wine. I worked for the state of California, and this was at the beginning of my career. So I was not a rich guy, believe me. This was my first experience with understanding customer service. How do I know that it was outstanding customer service? I know because it gave me the overwhelming desire to part with my money. That's how I know. Unfortunately, that experience for me was a little premature. This was the beginning of the lesson that I needed to learn in order to make sense of my world. The lesson is this: if the paradigm that you are currently existing in, meaning how you see and interpret the world around you, is incongruous with your goals, then you have to shift your paradigm. To say it another way, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. My current paradigm told me that the reason why I tipped so well at that restaurant was because of how wonderful the presentation and ambiance was at that restaurant. It was many, many years later, after my paradigm had shifted, that I found out otherwise. Did you ever play the game in class where the teacher says something to the first student, and then by the time it got to the 30th student, what was said had completely changed in meaning? Sometimes lessons learned are a little like that, because it was many years from that experience in Oahu, my memory of it and the lesson that I thought I had learned had changed quite a bit. The most important lesson being lost because of time. I was sitting in the back of that room in 2007, listening to Horst Schultz, CEO and founder of the Ritz-Carlton. This 5-foot German was yelling at the top of his lungs how every employee, including the maids, were allowed to spend up to $2,500 to satisfy a client. How every employee before their shift studied 3 to 5 of their company values as to keep them top of mind when dealing with their customers. How customer service starts at the curb and continues throughout the entire stay of the client. How the basic room rate at their property in Europe is €1,000. And not only do people pay it, when they leave, they come back and bring friends with them the next time. The memories of that experience in 1987 Honolulu came flooding back to me. I was remembering how the staff at that restaurant made me feel, how willing I was to part with my money because that feeling, and more importantly, how many people since 1987 I had let down. Every person that had come to me for help was my chance, my opportunity to make the world a better place and a happier place. And I had failed. I left that conference both broken and at the same time truly inspired. 5 months after that conference, my wife and I were attending an insurance industry Christmas party at the Four Seasons Hotel in Carlsbad, California. Even though money at the time was not a problem, because of experiencing a business bankruptcy in the late 90s and marrying a German wife, I had become thrifty. So my intent during that 2-night stay was to leave there with as much of my money as possible. But boy, was I wrong. When I told the parking valet that I had been driving around for 15 minutes and was unable to locate self-parking, he said, "Sorry, we don't do that here. But I will make sure that your car is always nearby. It will be safe." When I asked the agent at the counter, "Do you do anything special for travel agents?" she said, "Sorry, we don't do that here. But let me see what I can do." As she walked completely around the counter to present me with my room key and to escort me to the elevator, she said, "And by the way, I was able to give you a slight upgrade. Now, when we get to the room, I cocked my head to the side and I could see that the slight upgrade was a sliver of the ocean coming through the window. Just a sliver. But that sliver of ocean made me feel special. In the convenience store, the clerk asked my wife if we were enjoying our stay. My wife happened to mention that our room was a little cold. 5 minutes after we got back to our room, there was a knock on the door and it was the electrician. He said, I hear you're having some problems with your thermostat. My wife looked at me and said, oh, it's fine. I can just adjust it. The electrician said, sorry, we don't do that here. But let me tell you what I'm going to do. I will take care of everything from the basement. That way, you won't have to worry about messing with that thermostat. Seriously. This level of service went on for 2 days. And whereas the first day I'd gone to the mall to eat, as I didn't want to incur a really large dinner bill, that was the last time I left that hotel. In fact, we extended our stay an extra 2 days, paying the going weekend rate. Really, we didn't care about the cost. I tipped so much and so often that at times the tip was close to the actual bill. I could not wait to give these people my money just because of the way they made me feel. And that was the lesson. I could go on and on about the experience, all the little things that made us feel special. But this brings me to my third and last epiphany. If it is going to depend on me to make it happen, and all roads to success lead through other people, then the better I can make these people feel, the more guaranteed my success is. Duh! You can go through life having mediocre experiences, relationships, and successes. Sure, you can do that. But if you really want to take your life, your work, and your business to the next level and beyond, the secret really is not a secret. Just make people feel good. Mr. Toastmaster.
Then Mr. H. Lee Sullivan. Let's give it up for Mr. H. Lee Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Victor Irving Jenkins. Leon, as usual, you gave a fantastic speech. The way you opened that up with that I got you joke was, I thought, absolutely masterful because nobody saw that coming. And when you can do that, you have your audience. And you had all of us in the palm of your hands. I loved the way that you used storytelling. You had a story about your old friend on the road crew when you worked for the state. And you had the ability to evoke feelings within everybody about the romantic settings that you verbally set up about your time in Oahu and how they made you feel. And then as you discuss what happened with you in the restaurant and you and the water boy, I'm sorry, I said what the water person, you know, I stand corrected because that was not correct. But the way that you made that person larger than life, in spite of the what could be considered a very low position because of the way he made you feel and the way that it made you go through your epiphanies were really fantastic. And so I have to congratulate you on all those things. There is one thing that I could have seen a little differently, but it was still masterful in the presentation. And what that was there were a couple of times when you were talking about what could have been considered low points in your life, that you had a little laughter that appeared kind of nervous laughter when you had the problem with the phone company, et cetera. And the content of what you were saying and the content of the emotions that you were evoking, to me, seemed incongruent for that period of time. But I am glad that you used the whole kit and caboodle of emotions as you make your presentation. And I'm gonna have to agree with someone else. I've only been in the group for not quite a year, maybe 3/4 of a year. And in that short period of time, I have seen you improve so much. I have seen you go from making speeches that were good, but not masterful. And then I've seen you go to making masterful speeches with background and dress. And I wouldn't say this about anybody else or anything else, but your dress wasn't what it was tonight. And because you've reached a certain level and we expect that from you, that I couldn't say that about anyone else, I was kind of surprised. But you're turning into a professional speaker. That's what this speech was all about. And that's extremely important. And Asada just told me I have to go. And I hope I told you everything you need to know.
Thank you.
That's